Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start with an apology. Nikhil couldn't be here, so it's me in his place. I'm Nicholas. He actually lost his passport. It's a bizarre passport blessing ceremony. But anyway, that's how it goes. I'm very happy to be here. I know him really, really well. We've been friends for many years. I come from a small place called Fremantle, which is about 200 kilometres south of Perth. So go WA, Indian Ocean. Don't go swimming there because they're sharks. So anyway, without much ado, we were talking about water. And I don't know if you're familiar with this term, be like water. It was actually Bruce Lee who coined that and basically said, you put water in a cup, it becomes a cup. You put water in a glass, it becomes a glass. Be like water, my friends. Be formless. And I thought, as a teacher myself, because I teach in a small institute, the Fremantle Art Institute, so it's quite natural for me to kind of have that gaze on Nikhil's work and practice. And sort of, I kind of think about it as being fluid, especially because he's really interested in the politics of landscapes and landscape painting. So in a way, what he does is he uses landscape painting to kind of situate himself. So he comes from the mountains in India, in Kashmir, where I don't know if you're aware of the politics of that place. It's sandwiched between India and Pakistan, and it's a tense part of the subcontinent. And so, there's always this kind of tension between, paradise, paradox. But if we were to think about water, we would say that, it flows from the mountaintops all the way down to the ocean. And he lives right now in Goa, on the west coast of India, which is really far away from the Himalayas. But, it sort of feels like he's got his body in Goa, but his soul is in Kashmir. So it's sort of like being split between these two geographies. It's interesting to note where actually drawing enters his performance practice is when he was teaching art in an art school in Bombay, and he was talking about drawing as a form of a body leaving a trace and a mark, as a mark being a trace left by the body as it moves across space. So in order to really test that, he thought it would be interesting to actually bring drawing into the live practice. And that starts sort of his relationship with, actually using the process of making drawing very, very visible. So he was invited by Documenta 14 with the curation of Natasha Jinwala and Adam Shimchik to be part of a project that was spread across two cities, Athens in Greece and Kassel in Germany. And I think the question he asked was, well, what about everything in between? So the idea that he came up with was to connect these two cities with a road trip that took him 3,000 kilometers up the continent. In a way, in 2017, when he did this, it sort of echoed what was going on in Greece. So he started with a performance in a tavern where, with using mud and clay, a material of land, essentially, he drew the picture of the endless ocean. In a way, it reflected the Mediterranean Sea. And if we were to think about the Mediterranean Sea, it's probably the water body that has the largest number of dead bodies sunk right down to the bottom. It's probably the most bloodiest water body in the world. So this was a time when large number of refugees were risking their lives to cross over into Greece, and there was many camps that were set up, and so it was kind of obvious for him to kind of think about that, but also to trace his own journey through the continent, up the continent, through East Europe, stopping in different locations. So this is the road trip where he takes to the hills, takes to crossing over from Greece into Bulgaria. So everywhere he went, he set up a 6-meter wide tent. And in that tent, he lived. It was sort of this soft space that he used to make not just performances, but drawings in. And wherever this tent went, it sort of became different things. For example, in Yanina, which is on the border of, I got to find out from him. Sorry, I'll make sure I send him a message about it. But it's definitely on the border. And so here it becomes a classroom where essentially a teacher is sort of giving them a lecture about what's going on. But it's also kind of cute because also there are, these really beautiful young people falling in love and flirting with each other. So, it's also what are the other things that happen in a classroom, which is kind of interesting that a soft space like that kind of brings out the softness in people as well, and sort of the informality of what soft spaces do as opposed to institutions. So that's literally what he's doing is he's looking out of his window and he's drawing what he sees. The next place he stops is he crosses over into Bulgaria, over the Rhodope Mountains, and plants his tent in an abandoned village. And sort of the lives of people are actually etched into the landscape, and they're kind of falling apart and becoming ruins, but you can actually smell and see life there. So here he kind of uses it as a home, as a refuge, as a place where he camps, and he sleeps here, he eats here, and of course draws this vast vista that he can see. Of course, there's campfire in the evening. People come from villages around to see what this thing is. So it's an odd situation to be in where, you would be expected to be hosted, but instead, he was doing the hosting, right? And it's kind of funny what happens when you're a nomad. What you do is when you plant yourself in a completely new location, what you do is you set yourself up inside in exactly the same way everywhere you go. So even though outside is a completely different geography, inside there's always this safe, warm, comfortable feeling of home. And it's literally just about how things are arranged. So every time he set his tent up, he would put his mattress there, the other mattresses there, that blue bed cover there, the green one there, the pink one there, the sacks went there, his clothes and his wardrobe went there. So for 30 days, he didn't wear his clothes. And one of the things he does is he works quite closely with collaborators, because I don't think there's any artwork that actually can be made on your own. You need partners to make things happen. As you can see, there's 421 that's come together with NYU and El Sarkao to bring together where we are today. So I think, look, Nikhil has my partnership right now to be able to do this presentation for you. So here he's in the city of Sofia. Now, how is he setting up these relationships? On what basis is he stopping here? So what he does is he runs he's an independent artist, but runs an art space in Goa, and sort of the idea was to connect with people who were doing the same things. It was not necessarily about kind of tracing refugee routes or historic routes. History of travel across Europe is embedded in the landscape, really. It's not something that one has to reiterate, but so the idea was to make connections that not just were about this exhibition, but were about creating alliances that lasted then for many years. So that's Sofia, Bulgaria. And every drawing that he did kind of generated a kind of dialogue and a relationship between the location that he was looking at, because there was memory in there. So for example, this is the quintessential mountain of Sofia, and this is en route to the airport. So a lot of people have that haunting imagination of people leaving Bulgaria. Bulgaria is probably one of the most abandoned countries. Agricultural reform has actually destroyed village life. In another 3 to 5 years, there will be no rural life left in Bulgaria. So the idea of the route to the airport is a kind of tragic one, because parents taking their children to the airport know that they're probably never going to come back. Or people on their way to the airport are leaving the country to not return. So there is this strange relationship that gets built up between, a city and its people as one represents it. This is an abandoned school, and they run an artist residency program out of there, but this is, of course, a time when they weren't running a program. And what he does is he pulls out from the library a photograph of this town when it was bustling with life, and today it's not a city that has that kind of life anymore. And I'm going to have to go a little faster. I've been shown the sign. And of course, here he's in Kozia National Park, which is in Romania. This is the Transylvanian Alps. Here, this becomes another kind of classroom, playground. Everywhere he goes, he's gifted with things. I mean, here like a kilo of sheep's milk, a bottle of olive oil. And then he's also greeted by, people who live in that village. So there's a way in which hosting becomes guesting and guesting becomes hosting. It sort of flips it in a bizarre sort of way. Of course, Budapest, where, one would think that you would be able to make something happen. We couldn't, because he was stopped by the police immediately and instead had to do it in a private garden. But, this idea that the show must go on is something that's sort of driven by the theater for him, because he's sort of very informed by that as well. On the border of Hungary and Slovakia is this bridge that was closed for many years, and as EU happened, this bridge got opened again, and people were able to move through that border. That border became more porous, and so he's kind of looking at significant places. Bratislava, which is where he sort of ends his journey, as the last stop before he reaches Kassel. And in Kassel, he sets up sort of what we call the exquisite corpse, not exquisite, the exquisite panorama, if you want to call it, where if you imagine a ghost train and a derelict Hauptbahnhof, of course, but if you imagine that this was a ghost train, that you were looking out the window and you were moving between Athens and Kassel. Then he does, of course, draws the last line, the straight line in Germany, the red line, which is literally the last line in the landscape, and he's there waiting for a train that never comes. The second institutional project he does is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is lands, waters, and skies. He's sort of obsessed with these elements that make up landscape. It's the sky, the land, water. And here he sort of literally moves into the museum for 9 days, sets up his tent. This is the part where he draws the sky. At the Temple of Dindur, he lives in the museum for 9 days, and he's sort of divided himself into 3 sections of the museum. So instead of moving out of the institution, he moves in as a traveler, as someone who's not just circumventing time, not just circumventing space, but also time, because, there's historic objects, there's objects from different continents, from different centuries that mean different things. But he's also taking a critical stab at the museum and the museum collection and asking questions of objects and where these objects have come from. What are the circumstances that they've come from? Why are they in glass vitrines? Why have they been removed from their contexts? And what is this new context that they've been placed in? Is this a display of power and cultural domination? So he really kind of questions that in this museum, where he is probably the only artwork at the museum that has the capacity to look back at the audience. So the idea of returning the gaze back onto the audience has never been more pronounced for him than this piece. So here he's sandwiched between, in this section, after the Egyptian section, which is the section where he renders land, he is at between a Solowit painting, and right behind this painting, this mural, is a section of the museum, which is a collection, the Rockefeller collection of masks and votive objects from Papua New Guinea collected by Robert Rockefeller, who actually died collecting, which is kind of interesting. So, you know, you give your body to have. So here what he does is he actually walks through the collection and actually looks at these objects and stares at them. And in that staring, you know, there is this exchange to say, I want to pump life back into these objects. And there's a sense of failure there. This is the last part, last location of the where right next to a beautiful Renaissance time Italian fountain that's trickling water ever so gently, and this is where he renders the ocean and the sea. And thus completes the rendition of land, water, and sky. So everything, in a sense, becomes part of the experience. You know, it's not that it's just the drawing, but it's also the act of sleeping, resting, eating, and going through the daily motions of life that sort of become. So this is actually a really thin line between art and life that he's really interested in occupying. He's really interested actually in occupying spaces in between art and life, between gender, between race, between nationality, between ethnicity, between color, between language. And so he's kind of likes to kind of exist in this grey, slippery space. Here he walks out as this kind of bizarre, I've still not figured out this guy, like what is he wearing? I mean, so apparently the mirrors on him are set up to reflect the constellation on that day. And he sort of, in a sense, performance has this bizarre way of predicting the future. So he was wearing this mask before COVID. And I was like, you stinker. Why the hell did you wear this mask? I mean, did you really set up the pandemic with that? So anyway, he kind of ends with kind of not being able to exit the museum and sort of collapses at the feet of the pharaoh. And what happens at the end is the security guards usher people out, which is called the sweep. I've learned in the museum when the security actually takes people out of the museum. And he ends there lying motionless. And thank you very much.